So we're going to get started. Thank you for joining us. My name is Elizabeth Aloni, and I'm the president of Brown, Stoner, and Schnepp's Media Webinar Division. I want to thank our sponsors and panelists. Our sponsors are Julie B. Fee Sotheby's and Chase Home Lending. Thank you so much to our attendees for joining us this afternoon for what is sure to be an informative session discussing what you need to know about relocating, renting, or buying in the Sound Shore area of Westchester. I'd love for our panelists, can you please introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and where you're located. Let's start with Fiona Dogan of Julie B. Fee Sotheby's, please.
Correct. Hi, Elizabeth. So thank you very much for having me. I'm delighted to be here. I'm Fiona Dogan. I'm a global real estate advisor with Julia B. Fee Sotheby's International Realty. I am located in Rye, New York. This is where I live. I've been a realtor for 13 years here, and I've lived in Rye for 22 years. I have 3 children. They have grown up in Rye, and so I'm extremely familiar with the Sound Shore area, and I'm a 24/7 full service realtor. I work with renting, selling, buying, new construction, investments, so full service and the whole package.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And would you please introduce yourself, Michael DeRosa of Chase?
Hi, everybody. My name is Mike DeRosa. I work with Chase Home Lending. I've been in mortgages for about 17 years now and have been working in Lower Westchester and Fairfield County for that entire time. I have offices in Greenwich and also Rye, New York. I also have 2 small children. I love what I do. I work with a lot of first-time home buyers, which I enjoy, and helping people make that vital decision on what's the best move for them and how to help them figure out the right financing strategies. Thanks for having me on.
Wonderful. Welcome. Welcome. Fiona, I have a question. Why should New Yorkers consider Rye and other towns on Westchester's Sound Shore?
So great question, and your audience might like to know that I actually started out in Brooklyn, raising my family. We lived in Brooklyn Heights, actually in the St. George Tower, 111 Hicks. My husband is a physician in Brooklyn currently and commutes. So, you know, one of my great joys in real estate actually is helping first-time home buyers figure out how to do it and where to go, because listen, I walked in those shoes. I was pregnant with my 3rd child when we came to Rye. We actually followed a close friend who recommended it. And first we rented, and then we decided to buy, and the house was too small, so we actually built, and my children went through the preschools and the elementary, middle, high school, et cetera, et cetera. So my point is that at some point, you know, people in the city, New York, Brooklyn, typically move to the suburbs because they outgrow where they are. They're ready for the next phase of life. That usually involves, you know, a growing family. And I would say now in these COVID times, actually, people are thinking about making a move earlier, not even waiting to start a family. So that's, you know, typically the reason people, you know, they're a little nervous. They think they're going to turn into the grandparents, but you know, there are wonderful, wonderful assets in the suburbs that people are looking for. So typically it's great schools, green space, recreational opportunities. Obviously people still want culture. And then if you are going to be commuting, and you know, obviously we don't quite know how that's going to work out, but you don't want to be commuting 2 hours. So typically people are looking at the Sound Shore for all of the above. Still to manage a job and raise a family, and you know, these areas have some fantastic assets that maybe other towns don't have. And I'm talking particularly about our beach and our boardwalk and playland. So that's just something that everybody admires.
Yeah, those are definitely some key and unique things about the area. How has the real estate market changed, you know, with COVID? How are people dealing with it?
So I would say that the real estate market, you know, has its rhythm, and the rhythm obviously this year has been extremely uneven, but the needs of people remain the same. They want a bigger house, they want a yard, they want possibly to be near family, things like that. So those needs have not changed. They've possibly become more focused. And you know, maybe the urgency of making that big change has become more significant this year. And I do think, obviously, the market was extremely quiet at the beginning of, well, let's say March onwards, because we were shut down. Nobody could do anything. And then when the market did open up and we were permitted to show and, facilitate trades, it really took off like a rocket. I would say right now in September, there's a little bit of a lull because there's so many variables at play just right now, October now. The rhythm of the real estate market is still that people with larger homes where their children have grown and flown the nest, they're ready to downsize. And the next generation is almost ready to take over because they've outgrown their 20s and they don't really want to be night clubbing, and they have a little baby, and now it's time to, get some sleep and teach your child to ride a bike on the cul-de-sac. So, those rhythms are still there. COVID has made people, I think, sharpen their focus.
In your opinion, what do you think the future outlook is for the real estate market?
So this is my crystal ball based on, not particularly scientific metrics, but, again, the real estate market this year was very unusual and people made a move earlier. And I think this fall is a little bit more of a holding pattern where people, possibly they rented, I'm going to say the Hamptons or the Jersey Shore, whatever it was, for the summer. Some people stayed there. Some people did go back to the city. Some people did make the move. And I have a feeling, people are kind of out of gas. Everybody's a little tired. Nobody quite knows, can you go out? Can you not? As I said, there's many variables. And look, the economy is a variable. The election is a variable. I think people in the city, some people may be held up by the city market, New York, Manhattan market, which I think is not particularly vibrant for sales right now. So, people have to make their own decisions, on that. But what I feel is going to happen is we're going to have a little lull, as I think we're having. I think people who did not make the move are going to say, I'm not doing this for another year. I'm out of here. And I think the first quarter, let's call it, December, January, February, people are going to be looking. And then I think in the spring, they're going to be buying or renting, which is obviously, don't forget that. That's an important part of, you could make the first step and try before you buy. So
that's a really good point. Thank you for your outlook. Michael, what do potential buyers need to know about financing in Westchester right now? What's the first thing that potential buyers should be doing?
Well, it's a great question. I think the first and probably most important thing, if they're considering a move within the next 3 to 4 months, is definitely get pre-qualified or pre-approved. If it's something that's more at the back of their mind and they're not sure if they're ready to take that next step, I always direct people, know your credit score. So through the 3 bureaus, Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax, you're allowed to pull 1 free credit report per year. You can check what's on your credit, make sure that there's no mistakes, because I can't tell you how many times I've come across and worked with a client that insured me, my credit's pristine, I have nothing to worry about, just to find out that there's a $200 bill from when they were on vacation in Florida 4 years ago, and it went into collection that they had no idea about, nor would they know about. So I would say that's the first thing, is to know your credit, get your free credit reports, and that will help develop the plan for moving forward. And again, if you're really considering making that next step and working with an agent, especially now during COVID, most realtors do not want people coming through the home if they're not pre-qualified or pre-approved. So it's going to be really important to have your ducks in a row, have the financing lined up, make sure your credit's been checked so that you have that letter to present to an agent so that you'll actually get to see the home. And if by chance it's a home that you fall in love with and want to make an offer, you have the ability to do so on the spot. Because that's what we've also seen, is it's a really compelling market. There's a lot of people looking to make moves over this past year, especially into Westchester. And if you're not ready to make a move and put an offer in and back it up with a pre-approval, then there's a big chance you're not going to be able to get into that property and even get to the point where you're wanting to negotiate to buy the property.
That's very important advice. Do you need to work with a local lender?
I do think it's important to work with somebody local who knows the dynamics and knows the players. I mean, I'm working with Fiona. I'm blessed to have a top agent, first of all. She's fantastic at negotiations, which is key in this time. And to have a real estate attorney and lender that all know the particulars, because contracts in Westchester are very different than you might see in New York City or Long Island. What most people don't know is that once you go to contract and you have 30 days for a mortgage contingency, most closings are going to be 45 to 60 days, at least on paper. But in Westchester, either buyer or seller can push that closing date out by another 30 days without a penalty. So that closing date, most oftentimes in the contract, is not the date that we actually close on, unless for some reason that home is vacant, that seller has already moved, or it's an estate sale. Oftentimes that seller may use that additional 30 days because they're not sure where they're going to go. So what I let people know is, if you're thinking that you're going to move and want to be in by, let's say, February or March, you really should start looking in November or December, just in case you're going to use that additional, or the seller would use that additional 30 days. So it could be, a 90 to 120 day transaction. Again, that's probably worst case scenario, but I think it's always best to be prepared, because I've worked with clients who were like, hey, we have to make a move. Our lease is up in 60 days. And they go into contract thinking they're going to be able to time it out perfectly, but it doesn't always work that way.
That's a really good point. Thank you for telling us that. And really the importance of a team, a knowledgeable team that is in place before you even find the perfect property.
And Elizabeth, if I can chime in, I can tell you an anecdote about this spring where exactly that scenario ensued. The buyer and the seller did want to close, and then the buyer out of Brooklyn was completely stymied by the fact that he could not get a moving company into his co-op because it was forbidden. So he had to take advantage of those 30 days. He didn't want to. And the seller was like, what are they doing? I said, they can't carry the two properties. So as Michael said, you do have to plan in advance and, do your homework. I often say a year in advance. And I also, say you have to kiss a lot of frogs before you find your prince. So it's not always that quick 2, 3, 4 week scenario. So, I'm definitely on the same page as Michael.
Great, thank you. Fiona, to ask you about that too, in terms of planning, how should buyers and renters find a community that's good for their family, especially if they're coming from the New York City area and they may not be familiar with Westchester?
Right. So look, everyone has their own criteria, and again, as a large generalization, it's usually driven by expanding your family and looking to the next step to raise your family over the longer period. So what's important to you? Typically, again, COVID aside, it was always the strength of the schools and the commuting distance. And so those are all still in play. But, there may be individual needs or wishes that your family particularly is interested in. For example, does the school have a full-size orchestra, or is there a very competitive swim team, things like that. But you can do a lot online. You really can. These towns have chambers of commerce. They have newcomers clubs. They have the top 10 what to do in Scarsdale, for things like that. So you can get a feel for the communities. But it's, if you don't want to be on the train for more than 50 minutes, I would start with Metro North in a way. And then the other thing is, hire a car, come out for the weekend. It's gorgeous. And I would say more often than not that the dyed-in-the-wool, born and bred New Yorkers, they're not leaving, and I don't blame them. I love New York City. But quite often people drive out to the suburbs, they're like, this is how I grew up, Mike. I love it. I love it. And, when you get into your kind of family years, sometimes you want to kind of replicate what you had. So, you have to let it percolate. This is a long process, and clients often say to me, I'm so sorry to bother you, and I'm not ready yet, and I don't want to take up your time. And I say, stop it already. That's my job. I want to get to know you a year before, 2 years before. I don't care if it's 5 years. When the time is right for you, it'll be right for you. But I want my clients to be very comfortable where they are and working with me, and so you build a rapport that way. And For example, if you were to work with me in this area, you know, I raised my children here. We've been here for years. There isn't a service in this town we haven't used, I can promise you. I'm on the board of the Arts Center. You know, actually, we don't have a dog, but many of my friends take their dogs. All of the above, right? My kids run the swim team, things like that. So, you know, when you find a local realtor who's lived in the area, someone who has maybe gone, as I said, walked in your shoes, you're really going to get a good snapshot. And it is not my job to steer you. I'm not going to say that's a bad street and that's a good street, but I can give you the benefit of my experience. And I can also introduce you to so many happy clients. I'm not introducing you to the unhappy ones, but the happy ones I will share with you. They'll talk to you about the town. So, you know, in essence, you're going to want to partner with a good local realtor.
I don't believe you have any unhappy clients. You're a treasure. I mean, everyone should be so lucky to have an agent that is that committed to them finding what's right for them. That's phenomenal.
Look, first of all, I love what I do, and I am a person of integrity, but listen, I live in this town. You're going to be my neighbor, so I sure want you to be happy.
Absolutely. You don't want any mean stares in the coffee shop.
Or running around saying, don't talk to her.
Wonderful, wonderful. Let me switch gears, Michael. Where are the mortgage rates right now? And you know, what kind of lending standards should potential buyers expect to encounter right now?
So mortgage rates have been phenomenal. We're still looking at rates that are 3% or below, and that's for a 30-year fixed. Since COVID, guidelines have tightened up a little bit. So in the past, debt to income ratios have gone up to about 50%. What I mean by that is how much debt you have versus the income. And that's been lowered to closer to 43%. So depending on the type of loan program that you'd be going for, that would depend on the type of standards we'd be looking at. The other key piece is that lenders really do want to see that a client has reserves for the process and they're not spending all of their money on the purchase. What I mean by reserves is that they have money left over after closing. Should they fall upon a hardship, at least they can pay their bills for the next 6 or 12 months. So those are some of the things that we've come across that maybe have tightened up just a little bit since COVID started. But I do think by the end of this year, we'll see things open back up in terms of credit profiles and lending standards, which should make it a little bit easier for clients looking to purchase early spring.
Okay, great. And those mortgage rates, wow.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
Fiona, what do potential buyers coming from the city need to look out for when they're buying a home in the suburbs? You know, what's the buying, you know, and then what's the buying process in Westchester?
Sure. So, you know, obviously real estate is a very serious business. It's the single largest financial transaction you're ever going to do. And I do appreciate that, but everybody's always so worried. Oh my God, I might buy in the wrong place, or I'm going to make a mistake, or my buddy at the office is going to say you overpaid. It's always worry, because it's a big deal. I get that. So, you know, I would focus less on the mistakes and more on what are you looking for. Like Michael said, get yourself into the position where you are a viable buyer. I don't care. I will work with you for years before you're a viable buyer because I want you to know what you're doing. But I can tell you, and Michael's right, in certain homes, they don't want you in there. Don't waste my time. But if you are in any way prepared to put in an offer, it cannot be contingent on, oh, I have to go get pre-qualified or I have to sell my home. It doesn't work in Westchester. As Michael said, it's a pretty vibrant market. So, you know, you do have to focus on getting yourself in the best position. And, you know, people who are ready to move out of the city, do it early. And again, I encourage you to partner, find yourself a buyer broker or a renter broker. You know, it's the same thing. And what I mean by that is, you need a representative. I always say, you know, you wouldn't represent yourself in court and you wouldn't diagnose and treat your own illness. So you want to partner with an advocate, somebody who's going to represent you and your interests. And so that, again, people are worried, what's it going to cost me? What kind of fee? In Westchester, it doesn't work like that. I'm going to tell you how to find a good broker. First of all, you call me, but secondly, there are other ways to do it. You know, you partner with that broker. And that person has a fiduciary duty to you. There are legal rules and regulations, and there's no fee. Your agent, your buying agent, is compensated by the seller or the landlord. So in essence, you're getting totally free, totally professional advice, and the broker wants to work with you to help you buy that home. And so what I would say about finding a good broker is, everybody looks on Zillow, fine, it's a lot of eye candy. But I don't encourage you to work with the listing agent, because the listing agent already has signed a contract to represent the seller. So I'm not suggesting that listing agent is going to in any way mislead you or try and, you know, confuse you or anything. But their duty is to the seller, and they cannot be fully representative to you. So I would suggest find the town you like, maybe find the home that you like, look at which agency is representing. Find a large agency in that town. It can be obviously Sotheby's. I mean, I love Sotheby's. I'll never leave them. There are other brokerages, of course. Call the brokerage manager. People don't think about this, but call the brokerage manager and say, listen, I'm thinking of moving to blah. I would like to partner with an agent who has young children, or somebody who's lived in this town, or somebody who works with older people because my mother's looking to buy. That brokerage manager can give you 2 or 3 agents. You check them out. You call them. You interview them, and then you say, okay, I'd like you to find me a house. So that is the best thing you can do for yourself in advance.
Wow, that is a fantastic insider tip. Thank you for that. And you mentioned something about timing of a move. So Michael, could you talk a little bit more about that timing a move, financing, you know, whether you have to sell in New York City before you start looking, or should it be after you find a place? What is your feeling on this? What is your expert advice?
You know, another great question. And I think it really boils down to, as Fiona said, get started early and get prepared, because most people aren't sure if they can actually afford to keep their home while they're still searching to purchase another property. The only way to do that is to speak with a professional like myself, or maybe their own home advisor at their current bank. But talk to them, go through the numbers, have the credit pulled, and really try to drill down on the figures so that they know what their limits are. And maybe there's 2 different sets of numbers. Maybe they're not sure if they're going to sell that property first. So, okay, well, what does the purchase price look like if I keep my property in Brooklyn? Or what does the purchase price look like if I sell that property and now I have that money to put down on a new purchase? But I think the most important thing is, don't wait to the last minute. Really do your homework up front. Work with a professional, go through your figures, and then you're going to want to work with a local professional like Fiona. She didn't get to this point, but she is a fantastic negotiator. I think she understands how important terms and conditions are, and that it's not just the purchase price as it relates to securing a property, right? Maybe you have a seller that doesn't want to sell quickly and is looking to have a closing date 6 months from now, right? But you wouldn't really know that unless you work with a professional that could fine tune your offer to kind of match what that seller might be looking for over and above just the purchase price. But there's really no substitution for starting early, knowing your credit score, talking to a professional. So by the time you do speak with a professional agent, you start searching with an agent like Fiona, you'll have a really good idea of the parameters, right? How much can I spend? What's the maximum amount can I spend? In terms of that purchase price, what are the maximum taxes on that property? Because believe it or not, it's not just the purchase price that you're qualifying on, it's also the property taxes that play a big part in that. So you may be able to find a home and afford 1.5 million if the taxes are 20,000. But if the taxes are 25,000, maybe your limit is going to be just over $1 million. But you wouldn't know that, again, until we went through figures and really tried to drill down on how the numbers would affect you on the purchase price, the town, and the taxes.
And Elizabeth, I can piggyback on that. As Michael was saying, I was involved in a transaction last year where obviously the price was important, but we were the first bidder, and sometimes the seller will be like, well, that's very nice, thank you very much, but let me see what else is coming. But our terms were exactly what they wanted, which was a delayed closing, and that is not typical. Mostly people want to rock and roll and get out of there, but these people were renovating somewhere else and it wasn't ready, etc. And it also helped significantly that I'm local, the agent was local, and the family selling the house were basically my daughter's friends with their daughter, and my kids are friends with the agent's kids. And I'm not suggesting it's a whole cabal and closed shop or anything like that. But as Michael said, you know, it's not like everybody's in everybody's pockets, but the local connections smooth the way. And when the going gets rough and the emotions are high and the money is important and the buyer and the seller are adversarial and the husband and wife are not seeing eye to eye, and you know, things can unravel pretty quickly. And if you can have it's almost like a diplomatic back channel to your partners, because everybody's collegial. We're all trying to get this done. Obviously, the buyer and the seller are the principals, and so that can really smooth the path. And Michael also mentioned local attorneys. You know, I partner with excellent local attorneys, and you know, people say, "Oh, but my brother in New Jersey is going to help me." I'm like, "No, don't do it," because it really can trip things up. For example, out of town attorneys often think 5% at closing, 5% down is appropriate. In Westchester, people are like, "What's the matter with you? You can't afford it?" And the whole thing blows, you know. So anyway, so just to, you know, a quick aside on terms are important, not just the price, and the value of local connections.
Great points. Thank you. We had a question, Fiona, submitted from a member of the audience. What are some of the trusted methods to find rental apartments in Westchester, especially for seniors who love living in New York City and maybe on a limited budget?
So look, there is something for everybody in Westchester. There are obviously municipalities that command higher prices. It's typically driven by the schools, and in some municipalities taxes can run pretty high. Obviously for renting, that's not so important, but people do worry, can I afford it? Can I afford it? And so look, I do recommend look online from the comfort of your own home at 4 a.m. in the morning. You know, just scroll through, and Julia Beefy Sotheby's has the absolute best website. It's glamorous eye candy all the way through. But if you want to go to any of those you know, national websites, Zillow, Trulia, Realtor.com, usually the listings are there. But I'll go back to the same point.
No, just one thing. Can you give us the website? Just say the website. We'll share it with everyone as well, but perhaps you can share the website right now too. The Julia Beefy.
I think it's williampitt.com. Just Google it, Julia Beefy.
Okay, we'll get it to all the attendees.
Yeah, no problem. And as an aside, for my own website, links to all of that, fionadogan.com. So, so as far as rentals go, you know, it's an important step because it can be try before you buy. It can be looking, you know, in 5 years, I'm moving to Colorado, so I want to just have a holding pattern. It can also be, I just sold, you know, my life's home and I'm like, you know, traumatized. I just need somewhere to lay my head for a year. So all of the above, but I would say if you can narrow it down to a couple of communities, 2 or 3, because if you come out on Saturday and say, I want to see 25 homes, we're going to be wiped by, you know, the 4th. So narrow it down and then partner with a local agent and use the tips I said before. And especially if you're an older person, you know, a senior, you know, vintage person, you can call the brokerage managers and say, look, I don't want X, Y, and Z. I want someone who's patient. I want somebody who's used to spending time, whatever it is. And again, I really recommend partnering with a local person and they narrow it down for you. They sort out somebody will say, oh, I saw, you know, 25 Main Street and I love the look of it. Well, of course, online they are dazzling because they want you to stop and take a look, but you don't know it's next to the train tracks or, you know, other location issues. So I do think it's, if you can find your local agent that, and you have to have a rapport, you have to want to spend time with them, you have to want to have a coffee with them, you know, find someone you can work with and then go pound the pavement for a while.
Terrific. You've given us so many great ideas about how to find a good agent to represent someone. What are some of the pitfalls to avoid when buying a home for the first time, for first-time home buyers? And you've given such great ideas about how to find an agent, and Michael, you too, with giving advice about how to prepare yourself. But what are some pitfalls?
You know, I don't necessarily think of them as pitfalls. People are always worried because they've never owned a home before, and I totally get it. And you're worried, how am I going to find a landscaper? And what if the plumber? And, you know, what happens if the roof leaks and things like that? So first of all, so as a renter, those don't apply. The landlord takes care of all of that. But if you're looking to buy, really, again, dial back to what is going to work for you in terms of community and criteria, the number of bedrooms. I need a backyard. I want to be able to park 2 cars, things like that. And then once you decide what's right for you, you're again, you know, back to local real estate where the agent can really dial down and decide what you need and help you make those decisions.
Terrific. That's great advice.
You know, I want to dovetail on that, if you don't mind, Elizabeth.
Please.
You know, I probably average around 100 transactions a year, with most of them being purchase. I work with Fiona quite a bit, and it's interesting to find that people who come from outside the area, when they come across something that they're unfamiliar with on an inspection, sometimes it can scare them. So, you know, in the Westchester market particularly, radon levels can be high. Many homes have radon mitigation systems built in. So things like that they might have read about online as a first-time home buyer, to be wary of a radon or water or X or Y or Z, they should really work with a professional to understand that locale. And things like that might come up that may seem scary when they read it online, might just be a small issue that gets taken care of right at closing. So I think, you know, it's super important to work with an agent and not just get so worked up into what you're reading online and try to fill in every nook and cranny. Really get to know the agent so that they can help you understand the marketplace, and you don't kind of spin out of control too much.
That's a great point, Michael, because some things are typical in some areas that are just non-starters in others. So, you know, it's a little bit further out, maybe in Purchase or Harrison, you might see some well water, and people are like, well, what do you mean I got a well on my property? I'm not in the, you know, the Adirondacks. Or there can be radon, or, you know, older homes in Westchester typically can have, they used to use asbestos. It was typical. Now it's all usually wrapped and you know, but young families don't want to buy those homes. So typically sellers take care of it. So in terms of, you know, making a mistake, you're really not going to make a mistake buying a home with a good agent, because that agent will be able to tell you, you know, is a buried oil tank a problem? Is it's on septic? Well, what a disaster. Well, actually, most homes around here are on septic and nobody blinks, things like that. And then when you're in the buying process, the process would be to, you know, narrow it down to what you want, basically get an accepted offer, and between the verbal, it's all verbal until the contract is signed on both sides. So between your verbal offer and the contract being signed, you're going to hustle and do an engineering inspection, and your realtor will advise you, give you a few names to check. You go through that house with a fine-tooth comb. You know more about that house than you ever want to know, and you'll find these things. And if it's a deal breaker, the sellers will have to address it, because it will be a deal breaker for everybody. But let's just say it's typically the air conditioning units have a 10-year lifespan. And the inspector will say, well, this is on its 11th year. And look, they can actually go for 20 years and it's not a problem. But the buyer thinks, oh, I have to rip that thing out and replace it. So, you know, again, a good agent will decide in a list of, let's say there's 7 things that come up on inspection. I'm going to advise you, look, don't worry about the crack in the whatever. Don't worry about that. Let's throw the big item at them and let's see where we end up. So you really are pretty well forewarned and forearmed. And I don't, you know, listen, if you work with me, you're not going to make we're not going to make mistakes. We're going to be successful.
Well, this has been fantastic. Michael, Fiona, I'm ready to move to Westchester just so I can work with the two of you. Wonderful. This has been so informative. I truly appreciate your both being here. I want to thank all of our attendees for being here. Thank you to our sponsors, Julia B. Fee Sotheby's and Chase Home Lending. A huge thank you to Fiona Dogan and Michael DeRosa. Wonderful for you to be here and imparting all this valuable knowledge to our attendees. Thank you to our attendees for joining us, and please join us on our next Brownstoner webinar. You can also learn about our other webinars at schnepsmedia.com/webinars. And I wish you all to stay safe, stay healthy, and follow these incredible tips and find your forever home.
Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure, and I'm happy to come back anytime.
Beautiful.
Thanks,
Thanks
Elizabeth.
so much. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Bye-bye.